Hey, how's it going? It's Dr. Dan. So today's video is going to be another do-it-yourself video. And so we live in a 116-year-old house and we have plaster and lath walls. And I have an outlet that I want to put in. Now I've put in quite a few of these, but I decided to take a video today to kind of walk you through the process to make sure that you keep your lath really secure. That's the key thing. Don't dull your bits, I guess is the thing on the plaster part of it. And then for the lath is just make sure, keep it secure. Don't let it bounce. So I'll walk you through that whole process. Here we go. So one of the first things you'll need in order to find the studs underneath this plaster and lath is one of these zircon, this is the one I use, deep scanning stud finder. And so there's two settings on this. There's deep scan and stud scan. Stud scan works fine for regular drywall, but deep scan you need to basically shoot down through the plaster. And so I know from a little bit higher up on the wall that there's a stud somewhere around my piece of tape there. That's also gonna be the top of my outlet box. So you want to start your scan over where there is no stud, and you come along here and it got a little marker there where it starts to sense the stud. Now what I'm going to see here as I go over to the other side is that it typically, I know from experience, will mark wider than 1.5 inches. Okay, and so there is my other side. That actually looks pretty close to 1.5 inches. I usually double check it. And adjust the tape if I need to. And again, it's not super precise. You'll see in my next step here, I'll actually drill a hole. It's kind of a little pilot hole to figure out exactly where I am. Now, another thing that's showing on here is that there's possibly an electrical wire behind there. So if there's one of those, you want to have caution. This is actually right next to one of my attic space. And so I can actually look behind the stud and determine exactly what's behind there. All right, so I'm back. I checked out what's going on with the wiring behind the wall. I'm going to use this masonry bit because inside this wall here is actually old plaster and lath. And so there's a thin layer of plaster, and then we get into some pretty gritty, kind of sandy coating mixture that goes over the top of the lath, right, which are strips of board that run this way through the wall. So I've traced out my studs right here. Again, with that stud finder in even a deep sense, I don't know exactly where it's at. And so I'm going to drill over here somewhere close, okay, somewhere, close to where I think that edge is. So I'm going to pick right here. And I get in there until I make sure that I kind of get all of that plaster out of the way. I'm going to switch over with my bits and then go with a wood bit because now I'm basically running into my lath. There's always a chance when you drill in like that you'll actually drill in between the lath and then it would pop all the way through. 80% of the time you're going to hit a board. So now I'm going in here with a twist bit, just a standard twist bit. And all right. So obviously I didn't hit the stud there. Now there's a couple of ways that you could figure out what's going on behind there. You can get with a light, you can take a look, you can come up with a smaller bit and just kind of give a feel for how close am I to that stud. You could progressively drill holes over here to kind of hit the edge of the stud. Lots of ways to go. Because I have access behind this wall, I'm gonna go in here and look where this hole is and figure out how far it is over to that stud. I'm guessing by feel, I'm probably within about 1/8 inch. Like my stud's probably sitting about right there, but I'm gonna go ahead and pop behind there and take a look. All right, so now I'm back here actually into my storage space behind that wall. And you can see there's my hole, right? And I ended up hitting right through a middle piece of lath, which is totally fine. And you can see I am about 1/8 inch, but from that stud. So I'm gonna go back on the other side and go ahead and mark my hole and drill it. Now, I might come back around here a little bit later. Depending on where we hit among these lath, one convenient thing if I can get around the back side here is that I can actually reinforce these. But I'll probably even show how I do that from the front side, just because I know you want to have access to a bunch of these back sides of the plaster and lath wall. All right, so now I've got my electrical box, and this is one of the remodeling boxes you can see on here. It's got this plate with a couple of screws, and essentially when you put this in, you can actually screw this in from the front side. And because that plate can slide, you can adjust how far in and out that is from the wall. But here to mark my hole, I got my line here for the top of my box, just basically the ones around, like in your local area. This one's 15.5 inches up to the top of the box. And so again, I'm going to bring this over to just about 1/8 inch here to the left of that hole. And so I'm going to line up my box on those two spots. Now, if you have a bullet level handy, you could throw this on the side just to double check that you're pretty close to vertical, right, to plumb. And so now I'm just going to trace, right? I'm going to trace along the wall here, this box, and this will become my cut line as I cut through that plaster and lath. And that's really the trickiest part of this whole project, is cutting through that plaster and lath. So there is my cutout, and I'll get my tools ready to go ahead and cut that hole. And I'm using this Rockwell Sonocrafter. This is one of my favorite tools for doing any kind of remodeling or finish work. Lots of different heads you can put onto this. A lot of the ones I end up using are cutting heads more than kind of the scraping or sanding ones. But the tip I have on this right now is actually an old cutting head. It's almost perfectly smooth now. And this is one I'll use, you know, lifting up, kind of cutting underneath caulk, or I'm going to use it right here on this wall, because if I put a sharp one on there, it's just going to grind the teeth right off, because again, I'm going to actually cut into kind of a sandy mixture that's underneath that plaster. And so all we need to do with this now is, again, just get it lined up. The nice thing is you can kind of hold this thing real close, and I'm just going to basically buzz in until I hit that lath, that wood that's underneath here, right? So that'll kind of get me through there. Then I'll switch over to a sharp bit and cut through the lath itself. So I went ahead and made that cut. Now the next step here is you actually want to get this plaster. I've always found it easier to get this little piece here to release off the lath underneath it. Then you can at least see where you're at and have kind of less of a chance of cutting into that lath. So now that I've cut all the way through that plaster, what I like to do is go ahead and pop off this piece of plaster so I can kind of see what's going underneath it here. All right, so I'm just gonna get in here with a screwdriver and kind of start pulling it off of that lath. I should be totally removed from it. So I'm using my pilot hole that I drilled through here. It's hard to use those. It's hard to get in back of that hole. Well, hold that small step here, it'll turn. Peeling off what I can. Oh, interesting. I actually hit, we did some repair here in the house a number of years back on a lot of this old plaster. And you can actually see here I hit a piece of fiberglass repair. So there must have been a crack that was underneath this, since that's why it was as hard as it was, because I'm actually hitting some reinforcement. Just the plaster itself tends to be pretty delicate, but this is having a little bit more resilience. So I'll go ahead and work on getting the rest of that out. All right, so now I got that plaster out of there, and I actually found a little bit of a surprise. I hadn't remembered that I'd actually possibly backed some of this stuff with tile backer, but man, I was like, why is that plaster so hard? But it wasn't tile, it wasn't actually plaster. It was a little bit of this thin tile backer, which is a cement board material. But yeah, I must have filled in a pretty good sized hole or something with that. But again, I've just exposed that lath here, and you can see that the keyed in plaster, you can pull some of that out, kind of get it out of your way. Because again, I'm going to come in here with a sharper bit, and I'd rather it didn't dull that sharper bit. So just kind of moving a bit out of my way. And I'll go ahead and come in with the sharper bit in my sonic cutter and cut out those pieces of lath. You want to make sure that you minimize any kind of like big vibrations or bouncing in the lath itself. And so, right, the stud's over here on this side, and every single piece of lath has nails that go through that stud. So this side over here is going to be pretty anchored. This side over here is not so much. So you want to start on this side over here, because you want to make sure you get that free. If you did this side over here and then push over here, you're basically pushing on, 14 to 14 and a half inches of lath that you could basically break out all those keys and loosen these pieces up, right? So our goal is everything around here we want to leave solid, but just right where this hole is, we got to get through there, right? So we can cut in that box. And so I'm going to start over here on this right side and cut in through these two pieces of lath. And you can see up top here, I don't know how you can see it in the video, but there's a little edge up here. So I'll go ahead and notch that, and then I'll have to come back in. The bottom one, we'll see. I think probably this whole piece of lath down here will come out. But yeah, we hit like kind of one full piece, two full pieces, and then just a little slice up top there. Now you might have noticed a little bit of smoke there. You know, when you get a little bit of smoke, obviously you're getting some pretty good friction. Sometimes that's just because you're cutting in the same place with some really old hard wood. Sometimes it means your bit's gonna be dull. If you're getting a whole lot of smoke, you wanna check out what's going on. But you know, these bits end up being a bit disposable as you kind of use them. You know, they do wear out. I tend to order them online. I'll try to put a link below into some ones I've used. They're not amazing, but I haven't found any of them that last a lot doing this kind of renovation demo work. So now that I've got this release over here, I'm gonna cut this side over here, and then I'll cut across that top, and I'll see what's left after I cut the left side of this bottom one. Again, I might be almost all the way through and can just remove that whole piece. All right, so I cut this left side over here. This piece actually came totally free, right? So that's came out really clean. I used to actually cut these out with a jigsaw. And man, that was not the right tool to use. That's before I got this flush cutter. You know, jigsaw's pushing in and out here a bunch. It did a lot more damage to my plaster. I also was like basically rubbing, you know, like the plate of my jigsaw against the wall and scrape that up. I'm still probably gonna do a little bit of touch up here in these corners. Yeah, I just, you know, you be as gentle as you can, but you still end up damaging a little bit of stuff. And this one, we'll see. I might go ahead and cut across that flush. It feels like there's maybe, I don't know, just a hair below there that I could leave in for some kind of structural support. And then again, I'll go ahead and notch this up to here and then cut flush across the top. All right, so there was just enough there that I left this bottom piece. You know, one thing I always face in this is you feel around, you often end up loosening up these keys. I'm feeling pretty good in here. I'm just basically reaching on the back. And again, the keys are the plaster that squeezes through between these different joints. You know, just kind of curious how loose or tight they are. And you can see I'm right up against my 2x4 there. Now, I do need to double check. Hopefully I didn't get too snug to this one. Yeah, unfortunately I did. Probably leave a little bit more play space. I'm a little bit snug across here. Feels like I'm plenty good top to bottom, but I can't quite get that box slid in. And so I'm gonna carefully widen out over here on this far side about another eighth of an inch. Plaster a little bit, and I've actually cut back this one piece of wood right here. One thing I just want to emphasize as we do this is really just like let the flush cutter do its action. I'm gonna push really lightly because again, this is not well supported. It's about 13 inches over to the other stud. So I don't want to push very hard on this one. You certainly, if you wanted to, actually I might even do that. I might even go ahead and do my reinforcement here first. I just don't want to move this much more than I already have. It's already a little bit shaky. So the main thing I do to reinforce this lath in the long term is that I'm gonna come around and I'm actually gonna glue in a piece of wood here on the backside. And so I feel around with my finger and I get a feel for like exactly how long and how wide I want that piece of wood. Often it's just about, you know, inch and a quarter wide. Sometimes I'll even use, if I've got some of the lath sitting around, I'll put if I got a longer piece of lath from somewhere else, I'll put that back in there. I'm feeling for the keys and how tight they are. Again, just kind of getting a feel for where I can like kind of comfortably glue material to. Now in this particular one, I've actually got a good key over right next to it. And so, man, I'm gonna go with, actually gonna go down this one here. I'm just gonna trim off a little bit with my finger, or kind of snap off with my finger, just that little corner there. I'm gonna go with the real narrow one, about 3/4 of an inch. And so about 3/4 inch times about 5 inches, and I'll come all the way down to the piece of lath below it. So it's gonna go from down here. And I'm gonna catch this one. And actually above here, I've got a good key. And so I'm not gonna mess with that one. And so I'm just gonna come up and support this. So I'm gonna support this one, and then bridge it onto the piece down below right here. So I'm gonna go cut that piece. All right, so I just went out to the shop and I just got a piece of 3/4 inch, just kind of a little piece of trim cut off. And I've cut it to a length. Again, I'm gonna hit on this particular hole from the top of this lath right here, and let's go down past the bottom, because that's kind of where I've got a gap in those keys. And so I can test fit that. Just make sure that it sits right in there. And again, what you're really just trying to do with this is you're just trying to cross tie. You know, you can think of these laths, they're kind of like ribs, right? And I can actually, I haven't really shown you the inside of the wall there, right? So there you can kind of see the ends of those pieces of lath. And so I just want to cross tie those together, make it a little stronger. And again, I just don't want them running free for any future projects that I do, any kind of future changes, or again, I just want to keep this 118-year-old house held together. I grabbed a hold of some super glue. I really like this super glue. This is a Acfix 705. It comes with a universal fast adhesive. For this particular application, I won't be able to apply the accelerant, and the reason that I can't is there's just no easy way to spray that on the backside here. And so I'll just go ahead and apply my glue to my piece that I'm putting in, focusing it mostly in kind of the top, middle, bottom, because that's where it's actually going to hit those pieces of lath. And so if you're using wood glue, which I used to use all the time for this, you do have to set up a clamp system for that. The nice thing is you can clamp it right through this wall. Just make sure you use a pad so you don't mark your wall. But this, with the super glue, I can just get this piece back in there, and I'll have to hold it here for a bit to solidify, but I want to make sure I slide it over so it's not in the way. That outlet box for me trimming this last piece, and I'll go ahead and hold that until it dries. All right, so that super glue is pretty well set up, but I also just wanted to kind of reinforce this and also just demonstrate how I'd actually put a clamp on if I was using standard wood glue. And so again, you just clamp through the wall. This has a little bit of a pad on the head, and I could have put more on there, but I just didn't tighten down real tight. And this will also help me make sure I don't pop off that new piece as the glue gets totally cured as I trim off this last edge. Okay, so that's what I'm gonna do right now, is trim off that last edge, catch this top corner up here, if that's in my way at all, and then it should be good to go for that box. All right, so I've got that notch back out of the way. Again, just always best to if I didn't have to do that, because again, these are unsupported over here. But everything worked out all right. And now I'm gonna go ahead and insert that box. Okay, so now I can slide my box. Hey, there it goes, right back into this hole. I wanna make sure that your box is sitting back in there flush with the wall. That feels pretty good there. And then one of the last things here is just figuring out like where to put this plate. Just from experience, you don't want this plate back there any further than you have to, because then the screws go further and further back in there. And you will want some kind of an extension a little bit on your drill to make sure that you can reach all the way in there. So I typically actually kind of pull out on this as I put in these screws, because they always want to drive it back just a little bit as it kind of tightens up. And so the bottom one in, there goes that top one. Now I got this box in there skewed a little bit, probably because, I mean, there's a chance that this stud's a little bit skewed too. But this should work fine once I get that outlet in there and get the plate on top and everything else. And so that's the basic process, right? Then I'll just need to go in and wire this. And again, I do have access to the back side on this one. If you were doing this in a situation where you needed to feed wire, right? Of course, you'd feed that wire before you put the box in, but I'm able to feed it from the back side. So I hope that was helpful, seeing how we cut a box into a plaster and lath wall. And again, a little bit of cosmetic damage here that I'll need to patch up a little bit before, depending on how big my cover plate's gonna go, but nothing major, right? I should be able to fix that pretty quick. And again, maintain the integrity of that lath. You don't want those things bouncing around. I saw an electrician working early on in our home renovations that was using a Sawzall to cut these in. And I saw him cutting one or two of those, and I said, hold. I'm gonna cut those myself. And again, I cut a lot of those with the jigsaw, but then the sonic cutter has really done an amazing job to minimize the wall damage. So I appreciate your time to watch this video. I hope that was quite helpful and hope your projects go well.